Welcome all of you. The earlier session we discussed different types of Indian traditional medicines used in India since over thousands of years ago. Today we will see one of the most commonly used formulations from these indigenous systems of medicine, and the most important ones which are available in market today, which are made in a very traditional way, are Asavas and Arishtas. So, I am going to introduce to you the traditional preparation of Asavas and Arishtas. These are liquid formulations made from different herbs. They are used for prevention as well as cure. Asavas are Ayurvedic hydroalcoholic preparations obtained by fermentation of herbal decoctions or infusions with jaggery sugar without direct addition of any external alcohol source. So, this is very important to be remembered here, that all these traditional preparations do not use any organic solvents added externally or for extraction. The alcohol here is self generated, which we are going to see today in the preparation of these asavas. So, this alcohol is generated during fermentation, which also acts as a self preservative and also helps to extract the active constituents of the drug. So, during the preparation, the alcohol which is generated penetrates to the through the cells of the herbs which are present, and it extracts the active constituents. Let us look into what are the important ingredients which go into formulation of asava. So, the ingredients required are, first is the herb which is chosen very carefully, and this depends on the therapeutic use or the preventive use of asava to be made. Second is the sugar source. This is very important because the microorganisms use this as a source to breed, and they convert this sugar into alcohol. This is going to be the source of our microorganism. There is no externally added yeast. These flowers, dhatki flowers, which is Woodfordia fructosa, this is a natural source of yeast and microorganisms. There are 3 different colonies of microorganisms present in these flowers. Water, which is the natural solvent used very commonly in all these traditional preparations. So, water is boiled and cooled so that there is no external contamination in the formulation when we use this water. And the formulation vessel, which is an earthen vessel or a wooden vessel, or in modern days a stainless steel vessel is used. Hence, there are totally 5 ingredients which are needed to make an asava. First is our herb drug, which they call rasayana. Second is the sugar. So, it is either jaggery, sugar or honey. Third is the dhatki flour, water as solvent, and fifth is the formulation vessel. All these are cleaned prior to the beginning of the formulation. The herb is coarsely powdered to ensure effective extraction. So, when we powder the herb, the surface area available for the solvent to penetrate becomes larger, and hence it is preferable to use a powdered herb and not herb in its full form. Let us look into the steps in preparation of Asava. So, before we start, the work area where we are planning to formulate an Asava must be very clean, it must be dry, there must be no dust at all, and we have to protect it from direct sun. Sanitize all the tools, there is no artificial sanitizer used. To sanitize the pots, ladles, sieves, muslin cloth or funnels which are going to be used in the formulation. This is sanitized using warm water and sun dried. Commonly, there are some herbs which are used to sanitize. Solution of herbs are mentioned in Charak Samhita and Shushruta Samhita, or fumes of these herbs are used to sanitize all these pots. One needs to maintain personal hygiene by wearing gloves and hair covers so that no contaminant is added externally to the formulation of our Asava. How are the herbs pre-processed? Remove any foreign matter. This is called garbling. So, depending on what plant part we are choosing, the extra plant parts are removed. The herb is washed and dried prior to making of the formulation. Size reduction or coarsely powdered drug passing through 60 or 80 mesh is preferred. Not too fine powder is used, as it becomes a very fine sediment at the bottom. So, it is very important to use a coarsely powdered herb drug. Very important to note the herb name, the batch number. So, when we collect the herbs in large quantities for formulation, it is important to know from which batch we have used the herb and note the weight of the herb before adding it to the Asava. Batch number becomes important because if there is a failure in fermentation or formulation, we know that a particular batch of herb does not have the right constituents. So, the first step is to choose whether to make a decoction or to use a cold infusion. So, this depends on the type of Asava we are making and the herb which we are using in the formulation. Suppose the herb is liable to heat and contains some volatile constituents, it is better to go for a cold infusion. But if a herb active constituents can withstand a little amount of heat, it is better that we slightly warm the herb with water. This is called a decoction. Decoction is made similarly the way we boil our tea in water. The herb is slightly boiled very gently so that there is little more effective extraction. It is boiled in such a way that there is no great concentration, just a little fraction of the total solvent is reduced. Then we charge the vessel with this decoction. In case of cold infusion, the drug is soaked with potable water for few hours or it is soaked overnight, filter and the cold infusion is used. It is very important to maintain the temperature at 30 to 35 degrees. So, in tropical countries like India, this is a room temperature for most of the days. If not, then the whole vessel is placed in a cupboard in a warm place, or in traditional way they used to put it in paddy storehouses. The next step would be to prepare the sugar solution. So, sugar solution is prepared by using jaggery sugar. Sugar is of two types, the normal sugar or the khada sugar or misri, what we call it, the big large sugar, or honey, which is mixed in warm water. So, in warm water sugar dissolves faster. We have to then clarify this, make a solution, allow it to rest for some time and then clarify it. So, when we allow it to rest for some time, there may be some impurities which rise to the top, insoluble impurities from molasses which rise to the top. Just scum them or skim it and filter it through a muslin cloth. Combine the clarified syrup with the extract base. So, the decoction which I mentioned in the earlier slide, either the cold infusion or hot decoction, is then mixed with this sugar solution. Then we add prakshepa. These are called adjuvants. Now, these are mentioned in Charak Samhita and Shushruta Samhita or in herbal monographs for a particular asava that we are making. These adjuvants are other than our active herbal drug. So, this can be added either to increase the flavor, or sometimes it has a special role like to increase bioavailability. For example, cardamom, cinnamon, pepper is added as prakshepa. These are adjuvant drugs which are added. Stir the entire mixture so as to disperse it uniformly and nothing should form a lump. When our mixture is ready in the vessel, then now comes the step to inoculate it with our natural yeast. Dhatki flours are known to contain our natural microorganisms. We have to ensure that these flowers are clean, dry and whole or intact. Lightly crush them so that we expose these microorganisms to the solution. Sprinkle this on top of the mixture and lightly mix it. We have already selected our vessel. The normal traditional way is to make asava in an earthen or wooden pot, but the modern day asavas are made in stainless steel or glass. Leave a little head space around 10 to 20% because the entire mixture is going to ferment. Fermentation causes rise of the entire mixture and also formation of carbon dioxide. Traditionally, the vessel is sealed with a cloth or a cotton plug, but modern day they have lids which are not completely airtight, but it closes the vessel mouth. The fermentation time, typically 30 to 45 days the mixture is kept, the entire formula is kept, and ideally 30 to 35 degrees is an ideal temperature because that is the temperature optimum for our microorganisms inside to grow and multiply. Do not open this vessel again and again. We can observe it by slightly opening the cloth or slightly moving the cotton plug. There are signs of active fermentation. So, when fermentation starts, there is a little hissing sound because of release of carbon dioxide. If it is a glass vessel, we can see slight bubbles on the top of the mixture. This means that fermentation has started. There are clues which tell us when the process is complete. So, when the hissing sound stops, when there is no longer frothing, that means the fermentation process is complete and the formulation starts becoming clearer. After the fermentation stops, we have to siphon the clear supernatant of the sediment without splashing. This is very important because we are not supposed to expose this to oxygen to protect our herbs inside. A process of skimming can be done here if we see some kind of insoluble herb matter or the microorganism metabolites floating on top. After that, we can siphon the liquid. Allow it to stand for further clarification. Allow the liquid to stand for 24 to 72 hours, and post fermentation also sometimes prakshepas are added. So, a Asava monograph specifies whether prakshepa is added before or after completion. Some critical control points to be remembered are: the temperature should be kept between 25 to 30 degrees, else our fermentation process will not start. This is the optimum temperature for the microorganisms to grow. If the temperature is cooler, that is not favorable for the microorganisms to grow, and unless these microorganisms multiply, they will not convert the sugar base into alcohol. So, the entire process, the principle depends on, as these microorganisms start dividing, they convert the sugar base into alcohol. This generated alcohol then penetrates the herb and brings out the actives from the herb matrix. We have to allow oxygen, carbon dioxide and oxygen, it should be allowed to slightly escape, since if the carbon dioxide builds up too much inside a tightly packed one, that may lead to further damage of the microorganism which is present. The dhatki quality which is added should be very good, else the microorganism load which is added for fermentation will not be suitable to convert the sugar into alcohol. So, if the dhatki flowers are very old, stored for a very long period of time, then it will not be right for the onset of fermentation. Some troubleshooting: if fermentation does not start, if the temperature is very cool, then slightly warm the vessel, gently stir once, maybe the yeast is not uniformly distributed. Check the amount of sugar. If the amount of sugar is less, then the yeast will not have enough substrate. If it is early, skim whatever is floating on top of the formulation mixture and finally stir it. If the fermentation is incomplete, we can extend the time. 25 to 40 days, up to 40 days is the general time required for formulation, but if we find that it is not enough, slightly time can be extended. Excess sediment or turbidity is not good, and if the fermentation is too hot, still it is not the right temperature for the onset of fermentation. These are examples of some of the asavas which are used very widely and are there in the market. Loha asava, which is used to treat iron deficiency, it improves appetite and supports metabolism. Punarva asava, which reduces edema, supports liver and spleen. So, these are used for general health. Pippalaya asava, which aids digestion, treats intestinal spasm. Kanaka asava, which is effective in asthma. Haritika asava, which is useful in coughs. Chandana asava, which enhances complexions. So, these are some of the commonly used asavas. Apart from this, there are many more available in the market which are used as nutraceutical products and for general wellness. Coming to Arishtas, Asavas and Arishtas are two sides of the same coin. The only difference in an Arishta is the preparation, formulation steps, the ingredients, everything is same like an Asava. The only difference here is Arishta uses a hot decoction always. So, to define an Arishta, it is similar to an Asava. It is an Ayurvedic self-generated alcoholic preparation obtained by fermentation of herbal decoction. The ingredients like Asava, there is a main herb or drug involved, jaggery, sugar or honey, dhataki flowers and coarse powders, prakshepa or the herbs. The steps, general steps remain the same. We have to prepare, but the only difference here is heat is used and a hot decoction is used. Sugar base remains same. The microbial source is dhatki flowers, fermentation vessel, fermentation time, and then finally store it in bottles. Preparation of Arishta remains the same, what I mentioned earlier for Asava. Here, like I mentioned before, the tests are also the same to know if the onset of fermentation has started. Floating of dravya. So, as the fermentation starts, we can see that the herb and the microbial waste starts floating on top. There is some effervescence, some small frothing starts on the top. There is an hissing sound. So, when you open an aerated bottle, if you open the cap slowly, there is release of carbon dioxide. That similar hissing sound you can hear at the onset of fermentation because carbon dioxide has started to evolve. This is a very traditional old method of finding out whether fermentation has started. When you hold a burning candle at the mouth of the fermentation vessel, if the fermentation has started, this candle extinguishes. Why? Because carbon dioxide which is coming from the fermentation vessel puts off the fire of the burning candle. So, this is a simple test for Asava and for Arishta to find out if the fermentation process has started. Once the effervescence stops, which means the fermentation process is completed. The hissing sound also stops and the candle now continues to burn because the carbon dioxide evolution has stopped from the vessel. So, Arishtas and Asavas are placed in husk, wheat or paddy if the room temperatures are not up to 30 degrees, 30 to 30 degrees. If it is not warm enough, then we can place these in husk, wheat or paddy. Autumn is a very good season to be chosen to make these formulation, and the duration, like I mentioned before, depends on the monograph of a particular Asava and Arishta. These are some of the examples which are there in the market. Draksharishta, Dasamularishta, which uses 10 roots, Kumar Asava and Kandan Asava. Difference between Asavas and Arishtas. So, the fermentation process, the formulation process remains the same. Here for Asava, mostly it is prepared from fresh juices, which means heat is less used. Swarasa it is called, or cold infusion, which is called hima or aqueous solution of herbs. Decoction is not mandatory in case of Asava, whereas in case of Arishta, a boiled decoction is mandatory and it is boiled nicely concentrated before the onset of fermentation. The key difference hence is an Asava uses a cold juice, whereas an Arishta always uses a boiled decoction. The heat exposure hence in an Asava is less and in a Arishta is more. So, it is important that herbs which are liable or destroyed by heat are formulated as Asava, and herbs which can withstand heat go into formulation of an Arishta. The fermentation duration, Asava requires a little longer fermentation, whereas Arishta, the fermentation is faster since it is concentrated. Consistency, Asavas are generally more lighter, clearer and more aromatic, whereas Arishtas are thicker, darker and stronger in taste. The alcohol content is less in case of Asava and it is more in case of Arishta. To summarize, the difference between an Asava, the formulation process remains the same, but an Arishta uses heat, Asava generally is a cold infusion. An Arishta is stronger, has more content of alcohol, whereas an Asava has less content of alcohol. Examples of Asavas and Arishtas are mentioned here, and both Asavas and Arishtas are self generated alcoholic formulation. Arishta is more stronger, has more shelf life, and it is important to note here that both these formulations do not require any externally added preservative, since the self generated alcohol acts as a preservative. The alcohol enhances extraction of the active compounds and also increases the bioavailability. The microbial biotransformation which is used in this process also helps to convert some precursors of the herb present in the herb to more bioactive forms, and there is this self preservative effect which is very important in case of these traditional preparations. The clinical relevance, this is used for digestive health, metabolic support, respiratory relief, liver and renal function. So, very important wellness products are present in the market used for maintaining these healths. Also, each ingredient which is used in an Asava and Arishta is used to balance the tridoshas in the body. These formulations have excellent palatability, there is a rapid absorption and there is a synergistic action of all the herbs and the ingredients present in these formulations. A few references, and thank you for your patient listening.